Hello there. I am Kimberly Hayes.
And I'm Amanda Day.
And you are listening to
Fundraising Heyday, where we cover the how-tos of grants and fundraising.
And how we can all do a better job of changing the world through philanthropy. Welcome. So you may have heard, because we've been talking about it fairly relentlessly, our new 8-week cohort-based training program called the Grants Lab. And if you're either on the fence or just curious to know that if you would be a good fit, here are 5 reasons why we think you should enroll. And Amanda, our next cohort starts January 2025, January the 28th.
I believe it is.
So if you're listening to this episode when it drops in December of 2024, there is still time to register. Just want it, because we have a lot of people that come and go all the way back to the beginning and listen through. So that's great. I just wanted to give you a timestamp for that. So back to 5 good reasons, sound reasons why we think that you should enroll in this grant training experience, right? Because it's not just talking heads, although we're really cute talking heads who know some things. It's a lot more than that. So first of all, you get our expertise, right? We've been doing this for more than 50 years combined, well more than 50 years. And between us, we cover the proverbial waterfront when it comes to grants, grant management, federal, state, local versus private foundations and corporate. We run the gamut, and we've got a lot of stuff to share, and we love to share.
Yep.
And reason number 2 would be personal feedback and coaching. This is a training that we wish that we had had when we first got started. This includes an audit, if you will, sort of a post-review of a grant proposal that you've submitted recently. We'll go through it, compare it against the RFP, and give you some tips to make it stronger next time and celebrate the wonderful work that you've done, all in support of developing the most competitive proposal that you can. We also offer one-on-one coaching calls, 60 minutes. There are 2 of them throughout the 8 weeks, where it's what's on your mind, what are your lessons learned, challenges, questions about grant seeking, grant capacity building within your organization, anything at all that comes up. It's just us on the line together talking about stuff. And also, super important, practical skill development. So whether that's working with you to help you make a prospect research list that is going to be realistic and best fit for the programs that you want to do, or moving through the entire cadre of writing assignments throughout the 8-week period, that will leave you with a really strong template of the major components of grants, no matter what kind of grants they are, to help you when you apply, because it's going to be a lot easier to work with all the great information that you've gathered and put into that format over the 5 main components of the grant, rather than doing the whole thing from scratch every time, right? Yep. It's also small group setting. You're going to be together in a class style setting, but there's plenty of time, because we are all about small groups versus giant, little heads on a screen, putting it all together. There'll be time to interact, maybe time to collaborate, or at least time to share and learn together. Your question may be the very question that someone else was a little too shy to bring up, or vice versa. And finally, the long-term support and networking that we want to build in this community of Grants Lab, so that you completely realize that grant writing is not a solo sport.
That's right. So that's 5 great reasons to join. Like Kimberly said, our next cohort begins on January 28th. We meet on Tuesdays once a week over the course of 8 weeks. And there's a break kind of halfway in the middle to give you time to play catch up with whatever else you're working on. So you can find all the information on our website. Go to heydayservices.com/grants-lab, and you'll find everything you need.
So we are absolutely thrilled that SNF Writing Solutions is our podcast sponsor for the second half of 2024, season 7, if you can believe it. Founder and CEO Stacy Fitzsimmons, a self-proclaimed data geek, is a seasoned grant pro who's raised and managed hundreds of millions of dollars. She's a certified compression planner, and she has broad management experience across a lot of different industries like restaurants, retail, technology, healthcare, nonprofits, the arts, and state government. She is sharing her decades of experience bit by bit with us, so take a listen. So, Stacy, what are the most helpful organizational kinds of tools for someone who is building their grants team and their grants office from scratch?
I think the biggest thing is making sure you know what your organizational mandate is, and that you can build that grants office to that mandate. Having been there, knowing, are you going to do just pre-award? Are you going to do pre-award and post-award? How much of a budget are you going to have for staffing that office? Or is it going to be a single person office in which you really have to decide what is within scope for you and what's out of scope for you? And really try to figure out how you're going to offer those services to your organization. Really, the grants director in any organization is an internal consultant. So you really want to kind of have that sense as well, because you're serving all the different programs within your organization. So what services are you going to offer? What are your expectations for others? And really kind of solidify that in in a department concept, as well as policies, procedures. What are your expectations for submission versus due dates versus when you're going to have documents? We all know that there's those organizations that require documentation 2 weeks before the due date. Are you going to be one of those? Do you need it 3 or 4 days before the deadline? Just making sure expectations are known and that it's solidified in policies and procedures really helps. And if there are people that are looking for that type of information, I do have a blog series on the website.
Nice.
To find out more about Stacy Fitzsimmons and her incredible team at SNF Writing Solutions, visit snfwritingsolutions.com. If you want the tools and resources to up your organization's grant game, check out their services provided page and reach out to them today.
So, believe it or not, this is our last episode of season 7. Dun, dun, dun. But it is not our last episode ever.
Nope.
So, we're going to come on back. Everybody needs a little time off. And I think this year, more than many others in recent memory, we could all use a little time to regroup. So we're going to be coming back as we usually do. We take a little break in December. We come back. Season 8 will be arriving January 9th, 2025.
Yep, that's right. We take this break because December is both a great time to celebrate all we've accomplished for the year. It's also a good time to be reflective of that year and to look forward and what's to come and get planning in and all that good stuff. So that's why we love wrapping each season with a top 10 list, because it's kind of a good way to both celebrate and plan ahead. This year, we decided our top 10 was going to be the top 10 things we've learned about grants over our careers. And like Kimberly said earlier, we have a combined 50 plus years experience. So we've learned a thing or two. It's kind of hard to narrow it down to 10, but we made it happen.
Yeah, we wanted to pick sort of the big ticket, big picture, high level, high concept kinds of things, as opposed to learning the ins and outs of a specific portal for a grant or something like that. Like the big stuff that occurred, at least for me, at different phases in my career. So here we are. We're going to get started with it.
That's right. We're going to let you start, Kimberly. So what's your first thing on our top 10 list?
Number one, and I chose this as my number one because it was the first major thing I learned 20 years ago. And it's that budgets and financial documents are not nuisance things They're actually an integral part of the grant. I know many people are like, oh, I knew that, Kimberly. Ha 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 ha. Look at you. I'm like, yeah, look at me. I ended up like overcoming that and raising more than $100 million. So lesson learned and applied. But I came to grants as a writer, knowing that I wanted to use writing skills that I had honed and developed over the years and through college and graduate work for something good, to do good in the world. That was my very vague goal at the time. And so I came to grants, from that language side versus numbers side. And so it was just a big deal for me to go, wait, this is actually another way to tell the story of this grant, only I'm using numbers, prices, breakdowns, and budget narratives, or in some cases, little bitty bullet points of what is going to go in it. That is how it can tie it all together. And of course, nowadays, when I'm reviewing grants, I will generally gravitate toward the budget first, okay? Because it gives you sort of a bird's eye view of the program or project that's coming along, and you can just sort of see the components of it laid out and take a look at how the prices are attached to things, and then it's a natural segue into the narrative. So I've really come 180-degree turn really on how I look at budgets and financial data.
Yeah, I don't think you're alone in that. I think not everybody, but I'd say most people that come to the grant field probably have a more of a writing background than there's not a whole lot of accountants that make the switch to grant development, although some do. So props to y'all. But yeah, I think that's pretty normal. So
Yeah.
well, so for number 2 on our list, which this is number 1 for me, it took me a while to learn this, but in the long run, sometimes it's so much better and wiser and smarter and less painful if you say no to a grant that doesn't fit than trying to spend time on that application.
Right.
And I say that, it can be hard to do, I think, when you're an employee embedded in an organization, especially when you have board members and bosses and colleagues and people going, we need this money. This grant is perfect. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. It can be hard to say no. And I didn't for a long time. I'd just be like, okay, next grant on my list. I'm going to make it work. We're going to do it. And we're going to do the best that we can. But I finally realized most of those that was my going into it. I don't think this is a good idea, but people around me say we need to do it. So here we go. Most of those were denied from funding, or we did get funding and then they were a nightmare to deal with because we were trying to fit that square peg in the round hole. And so things weren't working like they should. So I've learned that it's so much easier to say, hey, I feel that you need funding for X. Let me show you that how this grant isn't a fit, but these 3 others are. So rather than spin our wheels, let's go for these funding sources that have a higher probability of being funded. And I always tell people I don't have a crystal ball. There have been grants that have been funded that I've been shocked that they've been funded. There's been grants that I knew were a slam dunk that have gotten denied because once you submit it, there are things outside of your hands, right? But more often than not, if you've been doing this long enough, you kind of know what grants are competitive for your type of project and which aren't. So I've learned to say no and kind of push back a little bit kindly, but still push back going, hey, trust my expertise.
I love it because you're so nice.
Yeah.
I talk with some of my clients. I'm like, yeah, let me be the cold wind of doom. It's like, I know you hired me, direct service clients, not
Yeah.
training.
Yeah.
I know you hired me to write grants, but I ain't writing this grant. And let me tell you why. I'm not going to take your money for something that's a waste of time.
Yeah.
And let me explain why it's a waste of time. And in fact, on our website, we have, as do many wonderfully qualified consultants, we have what we call a go no go guide, and you can download it on heydayservices.com, where it walks you through so you have a document. So it's like, here are the reasons why this is a great fit, or here are the reasons why this is so not going to be a competitive fit. And it kind of leads into my next, in our top 10, my next point. This is just life, I think. It's not just grants. This is an all purpose. I'm still learning this lesson. I learn it every day.
Mm-hmm.
Everything takes longer than you think. Just
Yes.
patient as hell, and I get that, and I'm intense and all these other things, but by golly, I am still learning this. If you are reviewing a complex grant proposal, it's going to take a long time, longer than you think. If you are writing even a shorter grant proposal, it can take a long time if you don't have all the information together.
Yeah.
And you are waiting for information or a letter of support or a signed MOA or MOU or anything like that. It will take longer than you think. It will. It will. And just be okay with that, because that's what it is.
Getting signed into a portal because for whatever reason it doesn't like your email address. I have a standard Gmail email address, and I have a couple of portals that refuses to accept my email. So I've had to use another email. I've had to create another email address that is also a Gmail that it takes, but it won't take mine. I don't know why. It doesn't like me.
It's such a nice email. It's so easy to remember.
It's just my name. But yeah.
That's a
So
little funny.
but again, these are the things that you don't expect. You think, yeah, all I got to do is put in my email address, create a password, boom, we're in the portal.
No.
Sometimes, but then other times, no, it doesn't.
It actually makes me think of a common discussion point that I have with a lot of clients, and it's again around everything takes longer than you think it will. If you have never registered or it's been a minute and your registration has expired, and SAM.gov and grants.gov and perhaps a major federal agency portal, Department of Justice, you know, it will take longer than you think to register in there. It's not an automatic process. Yes, can you go online and get things, order things automatically at non-governmental sites? Sure. But you can't here, and that's just what it is. These are the things that you have to have in it, and it does take longer than you think would be right, or longer than you have time for. And that's just been a lesson for me to just back it up, don't get cocky and think, oh, I'm real fast at writing grants, so I'll just knock this out. Things happen, and it's just better to acknowledge that it will take longer than
every time. Yep.
Oh, I did get my driver's license renewed. Thank you, State of Georgia. Awesome job. And that I renewed it online, and that only took a week.
Ooh.
I mean, there are exceptions.
There are exceptions to every rule. True story.
So way to go, state agency.
Okay, so number 4 on our list is that no one else is going to take the grant application and all its requirements as seriously as you will. And I've learned this the hard way. I remember, I'm going to go back in time a little. Like, I used to despise group projects in high school and college because I'm the overachiever nerd that wanted an A. And so you get put with a group and you've got people who are just like, whatever, they'll slop something together because they're not as worried about it. So I'm picking up the slack. So I was so excited to get into the workforce thinking, great, no more group projects because there are group projects, but everybody's going to be pulling their own weight because we're all paid to be here and we're all loving our job, right? Yeah, that was a little naive of me. And so I quickly realized
that's like Bambi level naive, but that's just many reasons I love you.
It was my hope, my fondest dreams. And I quickly realized that nope, still like group projects. There's people who just do the bare minimum, are happy to ignore things that they don't think are important or outside of their scope or their purview or whatever. And so I quickly learned that even though one person can never be the sole person that does all things to be responsible for grants for an organization, because you need subject matter experts, you need input and advice from finance, you need leadership to push things through, you need maps. So GI, you may have a GIS department and you need them to build a map for you. So I quickly learned that even though you're like, hey, this is a big deal, we're putting together this $4 million grant proposal, I'm going to need XYZ from you. They're not like purposely, I hope not ignoring you, but that's not going to be number one on their priority. So what I quickly realized is, okay, I need to figure out what are the components that I need from other people. I need to make that my priority. Like, I can't wait till the last minute because, well, for one, it's not fair to do that to other people. And two, it's not, they may be on vacation that week, or they may have other deadlines that come before yours, whatever. So, but I just quickly learned like I need to get that stuff from them early. And also I need to set internal deadlines. I don't ever say, hey, this is for this grant that's due on the 30th. Instead, I say, hey, I need this map for this project. I really could use it by the 15th. Is that doable? Great. Because then if they don't meet that 15th deadline, I've got some wiggle room to go back and say, hey, remember that thing I was supposed to have yesterday? How quickly can we get it? Because like I'm getting too close for comfort here, right? So I just learned that if you're the sole grants, whatever your title is, whether you're development director, grants administrator, funding guru, whatever you are, no one's going to care as much as you are. And so you're going to have to figure out workarounds because that's just everybody wants the funding, but nobody wants to be responsible to get the funding.
Or I think too, if you've never worked in grants, you maybe don't understand the skills that it
Yeah.
takes to put it together.
Yep.
But yeah, I totally agree. I think if you are a grant professional who does no longer wants to write grants, you actually have a leg up if you wanted to move into project management, because hello, that's like 80% of a
Herding
grant.
cats. Oh yeah.
So all this is sort of tying in. We got themes here. We got themes about get up and get it done and get your numbers right.
Mhm.
I also learned fairly early on, and we'll talk about this till I can no longer draw breath. It's look at those attachments first and start there. Like Amanda said, you're setting these internal deadlines with your client or with your agency, and you want to get those things that you are not doing yourself. You want to get that out in the world. Like, again, letters of support. This is tying into the things take longer than you think, but getting the budget out, letters of support, as Amanda said, maps, org charts, all that thing. If you are in a place where you are not having to do all of that by yourself, which honestly, I just would say no. I would say we need to work together, and I'm going to project manage. Going there first, even before the budget,
Yeah.
unless you farm out the budget, which I've done many a time. I'm like, hey, we did this last year. Here's some chocolate, finance staff accountant person. Could you just fill this in for me? And I mean, I've even had them write, I printed it out. I'm like, if you write the numbers in, I'll enter it in. I just want to make sure we're capturing this year's staffing costs or whatever. So I start that first, because I know how fast I can write and how long and hard I can work, but I don't know what's on other people's plates. So it's sort of like if you ever been to a fancy restaurant and you sit down and you look down and there are all these forks and knives, and you're like, what goes first? It's the rule, the old fashioned rule is start from the outside and work your way in. Well, with grants, start from the outside and work your way in terms of those kinds of attachments and other things, so that you're not scrambling for those at the last minute, because your emergency is probably not going to be somebody else's priority. That's just,
Yeah.
you know.
Yep. Oh yeah, and all those attachments that can be easily like
Yep.
I used to put those to the end. I'm like, oh, I'll work the grant. The narrative's the most important. That's where I'm going to start. But you're right. If you leave off the support letters and the MOUs and those things that maybe require multiple people to see and sign, that's a problem. So
Sure is.
So number 6 on our list is that funders are more likely to award organizations with a healthy budget and successful program. In other words, you don't have to paint this picture of we're so broke, please come save us. And that took me, thankfully, not too long to learn, but like I came to grants not from any sort of grant background in any other than just like, hey, Amanda, you're going to be our grant writer now, go. And I thought, okay, we want them to give us funding. Well, why should they give us funding? Well, because we need it. Why do we need it? Oh, because without you, dear funder, we can't do anything. And that's so wrong, because funders, it's kind of like banks, right? The higher your credit score, the more you're going to be able to get a better loan from the bank. Grants
Sure.
are sort of that thing where funders, yes, they want to solve a problem and they want to fix a need. So there certainly has to be a need there. I'm not saying that's devoid, but they want to give it to an organization that they know has the experience and the bandwidth and the wherewithal to do well by those funds. And the way you do that is show them, hey, we have our own healthy budget and we've done X, Y, and Z before. And we've gotten funds from other funders before. Because used to, I would never, I'm like, I'm not ever telling them we got another grant because then they won't help us. Well, really, they're like, oh, so and so funded you? We know them. Okay, yeah, if they gave you, if they were willing and they worked with you, then that we'll look at you too, right? So that was kind of a flip on my original thinking of it is okay. And I still have clients sometimes that they're like, we just we've got too much money in the bank. They're never going to fund us. And I'm like, no, you've got a healthy, diverse portfolio of funding. This is a good thing. This is how I can talk about you're sustainable because when the grant ends, you still have funding to keep this program going. So,
And there are exceptions, right? Because I'm
oh yes, there's
somebody's
emergency
going,
funding.
well, we got turned down one time and they said it's because we had too much money. Well, I'm gonna say there's some short-sighted funders out there, but I think it's also, I mean, you must demonstrate need. Like if you had $20 million in the bank and your annual budget was 500,000 a year and operating, okay, no,
Yeah,
no.
yeah,
And I mean, but if you are a certainly institutions of higher education, I mean, hello, hospitals, huge, massive budgets, often with endowments. But there's still going to be needs, or there's still going to be endowments that are restricted in certain ways, and there's still going to be gaps for community programming, for first generation college students, for critical research. And that's just one example. I think that's our job as grant professionals to go, okay, yes, we happen to have 4 months of operating expenses in the bank. And you know what? And as we're recording this, it's been a horrible natural disaster kind of season here. 4 months of savings to run your nonprofit could be gone just like that in less than 4 months if you experience a major hurricane or storm or something else like that. I mean, it's not this guarantee, but it is really healthy and good to have. And I think we also saw that with the pandemic. Um, yes, there will be some funders who will say, well, you just don't need the money. And if that's been your feedback, then maybe that with the next grant, it's like, do you have people on your waiting list? Will this decrease their waiting list? Will this decrease your response time? Will this increase access to healthy and fresh foods in an area that is basically a food desert because of all the different kinds of systemic lack of services? There are ways to talk about the need, but you do have to document the need.
oh,
And if
absolutely.
you're not comfortable documenting a need and you can't, then grants aren't for you. But by and large, not being you know, $200,000 in the hole is probably a good thing when you're writing grants, because they want to know that you'll be around to administer the grant and serve the community the way you said you would.
Yep.
So, which kind of goes along with Riza, the sort of number 7 of the top big things that we've learned over the years in the grants world, and that is communication.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm an introvert. That just means I'm not really big on crowds. And yeah, I think that's a good sum. I mean, I'm as you can hear, I'm chatty. I'm happy to be here, but I'm not big on crowds. I don't mind speaking in front of a crowd, but I don't want to be in some sort of cocktail situation if I can avoid it. But that being said, we don't have a lot of cocktail situations in the places I've worked. Maybe you're different. Maybe you work for a nonprofit winery. I don't know. But what has served me well over the years is building bridges to communicate between departments.
Yep.
And when I first got started, I was like, well, they should just want to talk to me because I'm the grant writer. You know what? I mean, you could play that game, or you could go, you know what? I'm going to go talk to them.
Yeah.
I'm going to go into finance. I'm going to ask for let's have a quick meeting to go over things, or how, here's this grant, and I want to explain to you how it works, and I want to see what suggestions you have, whatever it is. And the same thing with program staff. You can think about it as a grant pro, or if you're in fundraising in general, you get up in everybody's business where you work, because chances are you're going to be funding nearly every program there. And that varies from place to place, but you need to know. And chances are you're not going to know the very best amount of things and authentic information by only doing your business over email. It's just the truth. So, if you can, meeting in person or seeing programs in action, or if you're a consultant who works remotely with your clients, I'm sure you know very well the power of having regular check-ins, and maybe making a site visit if it makes sense, maybe going out to where your client is and understanding, and talking to people and listening and being that person that convenes. I know that's something Amanda loves to do, connect people, and you can take that same skill set and be that person. And it is kind of related to the project management aspect of grants, but it's the people management of the project management, to get everybody talking together so that you don't have a grant that's not being spent down, not because someone's taken the money illegally, but because someone didn't know that they had to code the invoice a certain way because no one ever told them. We can play a big role in cutting through some of that, and just getting the money where it needs to be, which is to better serve the community. So yeah, communication.
True story. Yeah, communication, I think, plays a key role in every job. So every job, no matter what you're doing. Number 8 on our list, I have trust but verify. And this really, especially when it comes to grant management. And this makes me giggle because I didn't realize how much I must talk about this, because this morning, my daughter, we're all trying to get out the door. My husband and I are in the kitchen. I'm packing lunches. She's yelling. She needs somebody stat. There's a spider. And so my husband goes up, deals with it, comes back down. He's shaking his head. And I was like, what's wrong? He goes, she didn't trust me. I said, what do you mean? He goes, she demanded that she see the dead body to know that I really did get the spider, not just say, oh, I got it, and then move on. I'm like, trust but verify. She's a smart lady. She's a smart lady. She's learning young, right? So anyway, but why I say this is, this kind of leads back to what Kimberly was talking about in the communication. You may know everything about grants in your office and how it works and how things should be coded and the processes and the policies and procedures, but chances are that new program director who's just come in, or maybe even someone that's been there a while, that it's been a while since they've dealt with grants, they don't. And so they may tell you, oh yeah, I've spent the money, but you do need to go check. Did it get charged to the grant? Was it coded the right way? Or, oh yes, I did get 3 quotes as required maybe by a federal grant. Lovely. Can I see I need to see, and the reason why we need it is because we have to pass it on to the funder to show that we've done it the same way. And a lot of that too, not only goes back, I had to do that, but I also had to communicate and educate people like, hey, it's not that I don't trust you. This is the process and the paperwork that I have to give to the funder, because they don't trust anybody, because that's just how the processes work, right? So you can't always just take people at their word. You've got to find the documentation and follow it up, mostly because that's how grant management works.
So oddly enough, that segues into my next one. We're up to number 9 now. About the biggest things we've learned to sort of about grants throughout our careers, the big concept, the big overview question. Yeah, hot take, whatever, at me if you need to. Grant management, I think, is harder than grant writing, straight up, 100%. Not because I'm a good writer, because I'm a very competent writer and understand how to write grants. But as Amanda just said, there's so many different pieces that go into grant management. And if everyone isn't on board with it, it can just be a nightmare of documentation, or it can just be a lot of documentation in general. And of course, I'm talking about smaller grants or corporate grants. Like if you get $1,000 from your local Walmart every year for holiday food for the community or gifts for the kids or whatever. Okay. But if you are, actually, I take that back. I have managed, $20,000 county grants, guess which county, where it's just a ridiculous amount of documentation and monthly and timesheets when no one keeps timesheets like that anymore. I mean, all sorts of things. So, and it just could be because of the way my mind works, but it's like there's so many little pieces to manage. Whereas when I'm writing a grant, I'm managing that project, but it's a singular. I'm writing multiple grants often at the same time, but each one is its own little unit, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I just feel like grant management is the gift that keeps on giving. Only it doesn't if you don't get your paperwork just right and get reimbursed.
Exactly.
I think it's harder. And if that is something that you really enjoy doing, it's not something I really enjoy doing, but if it's something, I know it's something that's critical to do. So I became very astute in managing the process because if it gets away, then there you are. And people don't get reimbursed. I mean, agencies don't get reimbursed, so people may not get paid. I mean, it can be that elemental if you don't have it together. But if grant management is something that you love, there is such a need for your skills.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
And see, I liked grant management because the type A in me, I like the orderliness, I like the consistency, I like here's your checklist, here's all the things, here's the deadlines. It can be a lot of moving parts. I'm not saying it's simple, but I liked or because I feel like for me, writing is such a brain drain because thinking of all the things and doing all of that's to me, when I worked someplace, I loved being able to do both because there were days that I would feel creative and energized and I'd want to write. And there were some days that I'm like, it's going to be a management day because I just need to and I'm not saying you don't think to do it because obviously you do, but to me, it was less like, it was just like, here's the paperwork, here's you file it. So that was me. But I will go, you
I
look
was
like,
going to say that actually, maybe this speaks to the control freak in me, but something about grant management. Yes, I can set up all the reporting deadlines and all the financial deadlines and the outcomes. But if people won't or are unable to meet those deadlines, that's when it just that's when I chase stuff down. Yeah.
well, and that brings us perfectly. We're going to stay in the grant management lane here to my number 10, which is you need to have a plan in place for grant management before you even write the grant. And so many people, whether they are just starting a grant program at their office, or maybe they're new to grants and they're the new grants person, everybody seems to want to jump in and let's write the grants and we got to get the money. And I get it because you've got things to fund and you need the money to do all the great things you're doing. But the thing is, that money's going to start showing up. And then suddenly you're scrambling. Hopefully that money shows up, right? Then you're scrambling to figure out, oh my gosh, who's responsible for what? And how do we track this? And how do we do this? And so I always encourage places, if you're new to grant writing, part of your grant readiness needs to be, okay, let's start thinking about when the money comes in, who's going to be responsible? Is there one person in charge of all of it? Is it someone in finance that's responsible from the financial component? Is the program director responsible for outcome data? Is this person? And the nice thing is there's no rules about this one person has to do this one task. You can set it up for what works for your type and size of office, but you need to figure it out because if you don't, chances are it's all going to be dumped on that one person. Hello, you, grant writer, that they're going to expect, oh, on top of all your writing duties, now you're managing everything and you're program managing and you're implementing these projects. Nobody got it's just it's a lot and it shouldn't be one person. So
And I know that there are agencies where that happens, or they may have program directors who manage the program outcomes.
yeah.
And then finance manages the finance. Fine, especially if that works well for you, but you must build that little bridge. You must build that little bridge and communicate because a lot of times the reports, particularly for larger private foundations or community foundations or United Ways and things like that, they go in together.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, I get it for large federal grants. You might be submitting monthly or quarterly reimbursement reports, with all your invoices and other documentation in a row. But there needs to be a meeting of the minds between the program outcomes and the financial outcomes to really paint the picture for the funder about how the grant is going.
Absolutely. Oh, well, there's our top 10.
I know there's so many more things that we wanted to talk about and share, but those are the biggies. Those are the biggies. And really, if you boil it down to, it's like, don't be afraid of numbers, handle your business, work ahead, grant management, harder than you think. And keep talking and keep engaging people. And I think it just all leads back to grant writing and grant management, not solo sports, even if you're the only person in your organization that has the word grant in your job title.
Very true. Very true. So thanks for joining us for this year's top 10 list. We hope we left you with some new insights on work and this fabulous profession of ours. Thanks again to today's sponsor, SNF Writing Solutions. If you want to learn more about all that Stacy and her team offer in terms of resources, coaching, grant writing, and more, visit snfwritingsolutions.com.
And with that, dear listeners, season 7 of the Fundraising Heyday podcast is coming to a close. But fear not, we'll be back in your earbuds. That sounds painful, but we'll be back on January 9th, 2025 to kick off season 8, which I cannot believe, but we're going to.
We are. Yep. But if it's too long, you're like, we can't go that long without the Heyday Duo. We encourage you to check out our Patreon page. It launched just a couple of months ago. We have a couple of different membership levels that include early access to these podcast episodes. Plus, every month we're giving bonus content, things like a monthly book club. We've got a monthly mistakes were made and lessons learned type of episode. Kimberly's doing a monthly deep dive thought rant, just whatever's on her mind. There's a fun playlist.
And the playlist, Amanda.
So there's all kinds of goodies that happen every month. Different membership levels determine what level of all the things you can engage in, but there's lots of stuff there. And how do you find it? You visit patreon.com/fundraisingheyday for all the details.
So we hope to see you on Patreon. Come check us out there. And we definitely want to know that you are downloading our episodes either off our website or Apple Podcast or Spotify. And until then, have a fantastic end of the year 2024, however you celebrate it. And let's welcome in what we hope will be a wonderful 2025.
Yep. As always, we're honored you chose to spend time with us today. We will see you next time, guys.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.